Hello, my name is Michael Sankner. I'm a participant, a presenter in the 2018 BC Campus Festival of Teaching and Learning, and as such, I was presented with the Code of Conduct, and I have some issues with the Code of Conduct, and I've decided to make this response. Here are some excerpts from the code. There is the URL. I've numbered these for ease of reference, and I've shortened it a little for the size for the purposes of this presentation. So number one is the URL. Number two, I'm just going to speak to the items that are bolded. You can read the rest for yourselves, but the items that are bolded are things that I find problematic. In number two, all attendees are required to agree that language is so categorical. The language is very categorical. And number three, participants violating this code may be expelled. So now the language is also coercive and threatening. Number four, we are expected to include trigger warnings. So trigger warnings, I guess this is a new thing. Honestly, I had never heard of it. I'm not aware that there is actually a problem with respectful behavior at academic conferences. I've been to a number of conferences over the years, and it doesn't seem to be a problem in an environment of, debate or, differing opinions, which is why we go to conferences. So the trigger warnings things also, I'm not sure really how you would implement that. I don't know what would trigger someone really. And furthermore, it doesn't seem to really line up with some communicative practices that are well known and established in the literature. And I'll speak to that a little bit more in this presentation a bit later. Number five, harassment being defined as something that reinforces social structures of domination. That phrase, social structures of domination, that is jargon, actually. I recognize it, I guess, from gender studies. Social structures of domination, that's jargon. And I say that in the sense that jargon meaning language that is specific to a certain discipline or profession, and that wouldn't be intelligible to, the person on the street. And I believe communicative practices and also management practices are such that jargon is to be avoided, actually. Number six, this is if you are being harassed or if you notice that someone else is being harassed or you have any concerns about violations, not about the code itself, but about violations, then to contact an event volunteer immediately. Apparently those volunteers will have buttons. So that seems that the code is establishing a kind of an external sort of policing function manned by these volunteers. And then number seven, anonymity will be maintained. And again, I think the notion of anonymity seems to run counter to some well-established communicative principles. And I'll try to speak to those as best I can in the following slides. So these are my concerns, or the areas of concern. This exercise of making a response actually motivated me to go look at my actual rights according to the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, because it seems to me that this code of conduct is actually impinging on my rights according to the Charter. Looking at the fundamental freedoms in Section 2, Part B, everyone has the following freedoms: freedom of thought, freedom of belief, freedom of opinion, and freedom of expression. So I have the right to my opinion. I have the right to my beliefs. I have the right to express. And it seems to me that this code is going beyond going into an area that is impinging on my charter rights. And I'm not a lawyer, but I'd be interested if others, like from a legal point of view, if that seems to resonate. Now, from a sort of organizational behavior point of view, the idea of having a respectful workplace or respectful environment, I think we can all get on board with that. I'm very interested in being respected in my workplace and in showing respect. Respect is necessary in the workplace to get anything done. And respect is, because of that, business is, in the business literature and the organizational literature, there's been a huge amount of research on how to have a respectful environment. Here, I just quickly pulled this article off from the Business Harvard Review. Study of 20,000 employees. No other leader behavior has a bigger effect on employees than respect. So there's been a ton of literature on respect, and the question for me is not whether it's a good thing, but how do you get there? How do you actually foster that respect? Seems to me that the coercive approach of this code is reminiscent of that old saying of beatings will continue until morale improves. Has that kind of feeling. But more to the point, there is a lot of literature concerned with what practical measures actually work as far as fostering respect. And my hunch is that, and my own intuition, my own experience, is that coercive approaches do not actually result in that effect coming out. There are other approaches. This is also more on the psychology side, but some of you may be familiar with this Languages of Appreciation book. There's a newer version where they're appreciation in the workplace. This is Doctors Chapman and White. So they are academics talking about something that works. They're arguing that appreciation is a way to get to a respectful workplace. So this is, they're marshaling some evidence and some academic argument, not about the ideal of respect, but about how to get to that place. And they're just, it's quite opposite from a coercive approach. It's actually appreciating. So it's, yes, a different approach. Okay, now my own personal approach, and sort of a framework that I ascribe to and a lens that I think about things is the nonviolent communication approach. I've highlighted in red the goal of nonviolent communication, making the world a more compassionate place through nonviolent communication, which is not coercive, not compelling anybody, and not looking for compliance. Those are all considered violent forms of communication in NVC. This is just from their website. There's a certification program. Some of you will be aware of this. It's a complete way of looking at things. And I'm just going to adopt it for this part of the presentation. So in the NVC process, there's this process of OFNR, observing, identifying the feeling, identifying the need, and making a request. That can be of another person, so observing what are they doing, wondering how they're feeling, wondering what their need is, checking in with them in a request for connection, or for ourselves, like, oh, I'm feeling this way, I'm feeling that I'm seeing this happening out there, I'm feeling something, and a certain need is or isn't getting met, and I can make a request. And I'm just going to do this concerning this code of conduct. So when I read the code and these coercive aspects to it, the compliance focus, I feel fearful. I feel fearful, like, oh wow, maybe I'll say something that I shouldn't, maybe I'll get into trouble. And I'm also fearful that people will be censoring themselves, and that I won't have as good an experience if other people are also fearful. I feel resentful because I wasn't aware that we needed something like this. I'm not convinced that we need something like this, and it's being imposed. And I haven't been consulted. I haven't been consulted about the best way to get to the goal of respect. It's another thing being imposed on me, and yeah, I have a feeling of resentment around that. I'm confused, partly because, well, I don't know what it means really. I don't know what it's going to mean. And I'm not convinced that it's necessary. And I don't know who's putting it in place. Like, I have a lot of questions unanswered. I feel some sadness because it seems like this code, maybe, I guess unintentionally, is pointing to us that we're losing something. It seems to me that we're losing some goodwill. Because we're losing some goodwill. That we're not relying on goodwill. So we're losing it. I feel sad about that. I feel curious. As you can hear, I've got many questions, including the basis, like the legal basis, given that I have charter rights for freedom of expression and freedom of opinion, which seem to be getting impinged. And so now I'm actually curious about my legal rights in this case. And I'm curious about a lot of things around this. And I'm motivated. I'm motivated to make this response, and I'm motivated to do this research. And I'm motivated to help if I can, and I'm motivated to talk to other people. So from a design point of view, let's say, or from an educational point of view, or even from a business point of view, let's say, it seems to me there's a fundamental mismatch between the goal and the strategy here. The goal of being open and welcoming, and then the strategy of consequence for violations results in expulsion. It's like, I want to be open and welcoming to you as a guest. I invite you to my house, and then first thing I say, oh, I'm open and welcoming, but if you violate my code, there'll be consequences that may result in expulsion. Like, these things do not go together. Open and welcoming is not about expulsion and consequences, right? That's really my key point. Comparing this code with NVC, this code is preemptive in the sense that it's anticipating and trying to head off at the past people saying the wrong thing. So it has that preemptive aspect to it, which I find problematic, compared to NVC, which is more, no, people are free to say things, free to think things, but if there is a response, then let's respond using that OFNR, what are the underlying needs? And in fact, in NVC, the definition of respect, which was put forth by Marshall Rosenberg, who founded NVC, his definition was all needs considered. That is respect. This code of conduct is coercive, whereas NVC is relational. And this code of conduct, I'm calling it externally empowering. In other words, if I have a problem with you and you have a problem with me, we don't deal with it together. We go to the volunteers. And so the authority actually becomes externalized, whereas NVC is personally empowering. We are relational. We work out together, and we both come out stronger. Now, it doesn't have to be, obviously it doesn't have to be NVC, but NVC is one way to think of this. So here are my requests concerning this code. I'm making this request to the, planning committee of the BC Campus Festival of Learning for next year, and other such committees who are thinking of having codes of conduct. My first request would be repeal this code, okay? And ask again, is it even needed? That would be my first choice. Or engage in a process to replace this code with an approach that has a better alignment between goals, which are welcoming, respectful, engaged, safe environment, and then the strategies for getting to those goals. And I'm a believer that things should be designed, not imposed. So designing that would incorporate stakeholder involvement, stakeholder input in design process. Or maybe in the meantime, third thing I would like to see, or a third option, or third priority, if there's going to be a revision to this particular code, then I would request that all coercive language and all language related to compliance be removed, that all jargon be removed, and also that the code be voluntary. Okay, that's my response. Thank you very much for listening. My email is on the first page of this presentation, and I welcome your questions and comments. Thank you for listening.